is global responsibility, reimagining memory communities and narratives. And please let me welcome on our stage speakers of the panel, Professor Johanna Mannergren, Mr. Daniel Bekele, Mr. Nadav Neuman, and Dr. Piotr Cywiński. And Paweł Sawicki from press office of our museum will moderate the panel.
Thank you very much. The last panel, the final discussion of the conference. I welcome everyone here in the auditorium of the International Center, but also welcome people who watch us online in the YouTube streaming. Also welcome those who will see the streaming later. And maybe one important thing, we're getting close to 19,000 subscribers on our YouTube page. So if anyone hasn't yet subscribed, you are more than welcome to do that, both here in the room and online. And I do hope that this final discussion will elevate us to some universal level of global thinking about memory, responsibility, as we've been exploring the challenges of memory in the last 3 days. And the panelists were named, but I'll just give you a bit of the context of each person. Professor Johanna Mannergren from Sweden has an expertise in peace processes and writes about transitional justice, memory, reconciliation and gender. Dr. Daniel Bekele, Ethiopian lawyer, human rights activist. He worked on promotion and protection of human rights, peace, justice, and support for civil society across Africa. Nadav Neuman, we're very happy to see you. I know that it was a question of being or not being here, but we're very happy to see you. The head of education at Sapienship in Israel. The aim of the company is to tell and retell our shared human story. If there is something like our shared human story, probably we'll have a moment to talk about it as well. And Nadav is also a writer and speaker focused on the history and philosophy of ideas. And Dr. Piotr Cywiński, who you've already seen on the stage, the director of the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum. And before I'll try to explore different fields of expertise that you have here, I'd like to ask a question, maybe to set a little bit the tone of the discussion, and I will kindly ask you for a very brief, short answer. We are all gathered here at the Auschwitz Memorial. We discuss different aspects of memory. Only a few months ago, some 2 kilometers from here, we commemorated the 80th anniversary of liberation of Auschwitz. 80 years is a long time for memory. Memory can be shaped or reshaped. Memory can be blurred or maybe forgotten. And could you, in this very short opening remark, try to answer the question, if the memory of Auschwitz that we are here at the site, that still resonates globally, of course, but is this memory in crisis or maybe not? And let us start with our guests from outside of the museum. So, well, Nadav is sitting next to me, so we'll start with Nadav.
Okay, you're asking if specifically the memory of Auschwitz is in crisis, but maybe a more general statement would be that memory itself in general is in crisis. And I think it's part of a larger crisis which relates to knowledge itself in the 21st century, which is in crisis for several reasons. And I think they're all connected to something like a lack of trust in institutions. And I'll explain shortly what I mean. We're flooded with information. It's all around us. There's more information that anyone can digest. But somehow that doesn't lead to more knowledge or more truth. On the contrary, we're surrounded with conspiracy theories and misinformation. And not to mention what's happening right now with AI, which we've briefly discussed just a moment ago.
And we will also discuss it during this panel, for sure.
Which makes it impossible to distinguish between real and fake. All of these things, I think, are being taken advantage of and manipulated by certain trends in global politics, namely populism. And I'll make it very short, but I'm reminded of a study conducted in the 1970s in the University of Washington in the United States, where participants were shown a movie that had a car accident in it. And then they were asked questions about what they just saw. And those who were asked, at what speed did the cars who smashed into each other go, gave higher estimates than those who were asked, at what speed did the cars who hit each other go? And then they were asked if they saw broken glass shattering in the movie. And those who were asked the question with the word smash were more likely to report seeing broken glass in the movie than those who were asked the question with the word hit. So there is this thread of misinformation that affects our knowledge about the past and so our memory. So all of this climate of misinformation that's all around us, it shapes our memory, and the memory shapes who we are and our identity. So in that sense, I'm sure the memory of Auschwitz is obviously at stake as memory itself everywhere.
Okay, thank you very much for this brief beginning. And so we put number 1 for crisis, and now Johanna.
Well, let me start a little bit on a personal note. 2 days ago, I was part of the group that visited the Auschwitz-Birkenau museum, and it was my 3rd time. The first time I was young, the second time I was there with my teenage children, and now I was there in this context. And all 3 times, it was a very, very powerful experience. And so no, I don't think that the memory is in crisis. I think the power and the experience of being here is overwhelming. And I think that's something to build on in the future. And when it comes to more in general whether memory is in crisis, I would say no. I would say that although, of course, I agree with all the problems that are there, I think that memory remains an incredibly productive and powerful site, not just for disinformation and revisionism and so on, but also for more understanding, for developing care, for developing a global or transnational understanding, so and for developing peace.
Thank you very much. Daniel,
Thank
is memory in crisis?
I think I agree with Johanna that generally speaking, I don't think memory is in crisis, but when a crisis unfolds before us, understandably, people will be overly focused on the most immediate thing in front of them. You know, like it's very unlikely for people to be reminded about what has happened in the past when something is in front of them. So it's understandable if we see a bit more focus on what is in front of people's faces as opposed to what has happened in the past. But it does seem to me that a crisis is not good, but maybe the crisis itself is an opportunity to remind ourselves about past memories as well. Why are we in this crisis? What has led to this crisis? And what are the root causes of this crisis is something that is also an opportunity to rethink about memory. But at the same time, memory crisis is also a moment when past memories are scrutinized, re-scrutinized, and questioned, and challenged, and tested, and contested, and so on, you know. So it is the immediate crisis that begs all of these questions. And I think, you know, like, I think Dr. Piotr was saying in his opening remark on the first day, memory prompts us to ask questions, memory prompts us to give answers. So that's completely fine. So if a crisis situation is making us to ask questions, and to give answers about past memories also, it's a good process as part of the memory project.
Thank you very much. And now Piotr Cywiński from the Auschwitz Memorial perspective.
I think two remarks. The first, that a crisis is not something negative. A crisis, it's something that can be treated as something really positive. Only things that count, only things that are important can be in crisis. If something that is absolutely not relevant, that has absolutely no value, has some troubles, we'll call that a real crisis. So first of all, if we ask ourselves if the memory is in crisis, that means that the memory counts. This is the first idea. And the second is, if we consider the memory as a relation between the past and the present, as a source of guidelines for our today's decisions, as a reference point, let's say, for the analysis of today and tomorrow opportunities, we have to ask, if we think that we observe some crisis, what is in crisis in this relation? Because the relation is important, and not only the memory. Perhaps it's our world today that is in crisis, and we have some trouble how to apply those guidelines from the past to today's time. So yes, I think that if we have some doubts or some problems to consider, let's say, the memory as something very clear, very, let's say, helping us today, perhaps the crisis is somewhere else than in the memory, but in this relation with the today's times.
As you probably noticed, I really hoped to get 4 different answers, and I did get 4 different answers, and probably if we would now start sharing the microphone here, we'll get much more, and this is good. And maybe relating to what Nadav said, maybe if I ask a different question at the beginning, is memory in good shape, we would have completely different answers. So this is the phenomena that we are discussing today. So now I would like to utilize the fact that each of you approaches the issue of memory from a different perspective, not only in terms of the memory of this one particular place or event, but also memory in a different way in your research, in your academic work, in your activity. And so with this more open question, and here I may give you a little bit more time to talk, and please do share with us your positive examples of how memory can help improve improve our world. Where do you see the challenges today, opportunities, or maybe threats? Because every one of you is looking at memory from this very different perspective. And so maybe now we'll take a step further, and I'll start with Professor Mannergren. In your research, the important words are certainly transitional justice and peace. Your research goes beyond, of course, the historical period that we are discussing. So perhaps some good practices from your field can inspire people who deal with the memory of Auschwitz and the Holocaust. How may we approach remembrance?
Well, I want to start maybe with just some reflections on this idea of global responsibility. Because when we talk about global, if we take a step back, and from my position as a peace and conflict scholar, of course you see a world that is more violent than ever. Not since the Second World War it's been so many conflicts going on in the world today. And at the same time, actually 61 conflicts are going on in the world today. At the same time, we see then this kind of dismantling of these global institutions that have been set up over the last decades in order to handle these conflicts, such as the UN system and certain parts of the EU structure and funding to civil society and so on. So, of course, how do we then deal with these, with the global challenges? I think, first of all, I think it's important to think about global as not one unified kind of strata, that when we think about how memory politics play out, it's not like either in the global kind of dimension or the actions to confront violence, it's not just in the global, it's all kind of intermixed. So you have the local level intermixing with the global level. You have global actors who are very active in a local context. And you have also very local actors and local kind of testimonies and so on that can travel up to the global level and affect how we deal with these conflicts. So just to sort of destabilize a little bit this notion about the global in order to be able to answer these questions. In my research and the research I have been doing together with a group of colleagues, one of them is actually here in the room, Piotr is sitting here. We've been working for quite some years on how to connect peace with the politics of memory. Because I think that we all even if you're not like working on peace and conflict, we have this sense of we need to deal with the past in order to move to a peaceful future. And how do we do it? And we have these global institutions like truth commissions and tribunals and fact-finding missions and so on. But how can we systematically study how memory politics affect peace? And in this work, we have sort of developed a kind of an analytical framework, how to do this, that also then relates to what I said about these intermixing of the global and the local and so on. And we call it the SANE framework. And the SANE framework is consisting of sites, agents, narrative, and events. And we claim then that we need to study all of these aspects in order to find out how memory politics affect peace. And so sites, well, sites can be, of course, this is a site. They can be authentic sites. It can be like denied sites, sites where atrocities happen, where we don't have a museum. And it might also be like very, very personal and local sites where it's just my personal memory, but it's not part of the big collective memory. And agents, then of course we have to think about the global agents, we have to think about the formal agents, the informal agents, and narratives can of course be from the very individual story up to global discourses around peace. And then events, of course, can be formalized, rituals events, but also unexpected protests and so on. And these are all the sort of lenses that we can use to study memory politics in societies transitioning from war to peace. And this is how we can sort of, in a much more sort of fine-tuned way, find out how memory politics affect peace. And if I have time, I can give some examples, or I can come back later.
You have time.
I have time, okay. Well, one example I thought that I would bring up, especially because I think that we haven't really, it's been some mentioning of the gender dimensions of violence and how we remember gendered violence. And so I thought I could use an example of that to bring this into the discussion. And I want to start in a small town in Bosnia and Herzegovina, that during the war in the 1990s, the place for culture, let's say, the house for culture in this small town was converted into a camp, a rape camp. After the war, it went back to being a community hall. Some of the women who were imprisoned there, they testified in the Hague Tribunal, the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia. And because of their testimonies, we now have, on a global level, international law that says that wartime rape can be a crime against humanity. And so you can see that the memory that they preserved through telling their stories in this legal setting has now been translated, and we use this on a global level. But if we look at the local site, which Foča is now in the Republika Srpska, so these memories of crimes against, in this case, mostly Bosniak women, is denied. And if you go to this place, they would say, no, this did not happen, and we are not commemorating it. And women's organizations have been going to this site, trying to put up a plaque, a commemorative plaque, but been like forcibly pushed out from sharing this memory. So if we then look at this kind of story from the sane perspective, we can see that there are sites. There are the sites of the tribunal, the sites of the actual authentic site of the crime. We can see how these voices, individual voices, feed into more global discourses and narratives, and so on. So you get my point, how these lenses make it possible to actually unpack how, when we remember something, how intertwined these memories are.
Thank you very much. Now I'll give the floor to Daniel. Memory is an integral part of transitional justice. Can also memory become part of accountability, process of building bridges, strengthening human rights, dialogue? How does this perspective look from, on one hand, your professional life, career activity, but also I think it brings here the African perspective that will be important also, another voice, another prism. So I'll give the floor now to you, and if you could share with us your activity and your thoughts on that.
Sure, thank you. I think the answer to some of the questions you raised would be yes, but let me try and explain it this way. And this would take me back to the main question or the theme of the conference, which is whether memory alone is enough in the century we are in and at a time of crisis. And I would want to argue to say memory alone is not enough unless it is complemented by the following 4 elements, in my opinion. And I'll briefly go through what these elements are that should complement a memory project. One is truth-seeking and a truth-telling process that should complement a memory project. You would hopefully agree with me that in a context of atrocity crimes such as Holocaust, one of the victims is truth itself. Because we have multiple truths and the truth is contested and there are different narratives, you know, like the kind of questions we have been discussing about. So we would want to know the truth, we would want to know what happened, and again, coming back to the question you remarked on your first day remark, you know, that's what leads into truth seeking, which is memory prompts questions, and it also requires a need to respond to the questions. And basically those questions are trying to understand and trying to know the truth, what exactly has happened. So I think a process of truth-telling, basically a credible and a safe space for both victims to the extent they are available, victims, their families, witnesses, and perpetrators, you know, a platform where all of these people can come forward and tell their stories and tell their truths is very important, because this kind of process is what sets apart the fiction and the truth, the fiction and the facts. So I think you need such a process to really pretty much separate the facts from the fictions, and to address concerns about you know, contestations, historical revisions, and so on, you know. So that's why a lot of countries, particularly in Africa, we have experimented with the idea of truth and reconciliation commissions. So truth-seeking and telling is one of the things that we need to complement a memory project. The second thing we need is we need reparation for victims and their families. No amount of money, as you can understand, would be able to compensate the damage in such atrocity crimes. But people need reparations to get what they lost and to rebuild their lives. So we need, and there have been some examples, including from Lithuania, as we heard the other day, that countries have tried to respond in different ways, both in a form of individual compensations as well as community-level compensations, but some level of reparation for victims and their families, including individual compensations, as well as community projects, and some memorialization projects are a form of reparation for victims, which is an important component for any memory project. A third component I see as being very important for any memory project to be meaningful is the need for justice and accountability, and it's one of the things you touched upon. You know, when we talk about atrocity crimes, I understand it may not be realistic to seek and achieve justice for every incident or every perpetrator, but at least the most serious offenses and the most serious perpetrators need to be held to account. And we're talking about accountability in a form of criminal accountability, actually, because we're talking about not just a simple crime, but very serious crimes, some of which are international crimes, actually, when we're talking about Holocaust, genocide, and war crimes and crimes against humanity. So there has to be a measure of justice in a judicial process. Memory alone is not enough unless it is really complemented by a process of justice and accountability, but such processes of justice and accountability can also combine traditional justice processes, such as what we had in Rwanda with Gacaca process and systems, some of you may be familiar with, but basically it's about using traditional systems, processes, and institutions to tell the truth, to hold perpetrators to account, but also to give, to give forgiveness and to reconcile and to help society to be able to move forward. So I would argue the justice and accountability is the third component. And the fourth and last component, which I think is very critical, is the need for any society or countries that has gone through this kind of atrocity crimes to make sure that they take the necessary measures to ensure non-recurrence. Making sure that it does not happen again. And how you do not make this happen again, in addition to the number of other things we talked about, is necessary legislative, institutional, policy reforms in a country. What are the institutional failures? What are the legislative failures? What are the policy failures in a country that has allowed such a serious atrocity crimes to unfold in a country situation? So I think it's very important that we also undertake reforms of policies, laws, practices, and institutions to ensure that it does not happen again. So I would conclude by saying memory alone is not enough unless it is complemented by these four components or pillars. And these basically are the pillars of what we call the transitional justice process, as Johanna would also know, being a scholar in this area. So, which is why for a lot of post-conflict societies, particularly after such horrendous crime as atrocity crimes, the human rights community and the legal community recommends the importance of a transitional justice process that has these four pillars. So I think the responsibility of the global community, in my opinion, would be to support the countries to implement a genuine human rights compliant, victim-centered transitional justice process, which has all these four pillars. That's the responsibility of all of us as a global community to support the countries to implement such a response measure that includes truth-seeking and telling, reparation for victims, justice and accountability, and policy and institutional reform measures to ensure non-recurrence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure some of you here in the audience already started thinking about your different cases and whether the memory is accompanied by those 4 points, and probably questions may arise. Well, I saw Dr. Cywiński took the microphone, so I will address him now. I mentioned the 80th anniversary of the liberation, and on January 27, you said, while standing in front of the gate of death to the former Birkenau camp, the following words, and it's just a fragment: memory hurts, memory helps, memory guides, memory warns, memory raises awareness, and memory obliges. And of course, in this poetic form, now we may ask for some interpretation of these words, and there are many challenges pointed out here. And one thing seems to be clear also, not only from these words, but from we are hearing in the panel, it seems that we are not able to build a better human community without memory. But the question is it one memory or is it multiple memories that we need to take into account? Well,
the memory is every time polyphonic. This is very clear for me. there's no one memory, national memory or something like this. If somebody would like to create some institutes of national memories, that's very clear that it cannot function like this, because memories are every time polyphonic in every part of society, in every experience of some families, of some regions, of some, I don't know, religious or cultural trends. There will be some completely different, let's say, issue that will appear in this memory. It's important that, of course, it will be linked to the authentic facts, to the historical truth, not in contradiction, let's say. But I think that the polyphony of the remembrance is absolutely a normal situation. But I have two remarks that I think must be said. First of all, if we hope that the memory will change our situation, our approach of our rules, of our responsibilities, we have to rethink the place of the memory in the education. Because until now we are learning in the schools the historical knowledge, not the memory. And the historical knowledge, it's a human science that is very, very approach of exact science. You have to know what was, to make some liaison with some facts. Some are, let's say, sources of some developments of any other facts. You have to learn it, you have to know it, you have to repeat it after on the exam, and it's okay. It's certainly not the same as the remembrance, and we do not teach the remembrance in our schools. Of course, each of us knows some very good teachers or professors who are trying to add some reflections on the memory from a moral point of view in their historical teaching, but in the curricula we have only the historical knowledge that appear really. And it's a problem. How do we hope that some new generations will know how to work with the memory, how to use the memory, how to let the memory help them, if we absolutely do not learn them how it is, what that means, let's say, to remember something, really, not only to know some facts, but to have it as a living memory. This is the first thing that, for that reason, many dramas from the past, many tragic but also important events are going back and back in this history, and you know, nobody will think now about the times of Napoleon, let's say, if it will bring us some answers for the today's times, because it's completely packed in the past, and it stays not as a memory, but as a historical fact that we know. Nobody would speak about Nero, who burned Rome to some small kids that are playing with fire, because there's no liaison between the tragedy of Rome at that time and the fact that you play fire now. So the historical fact is certainly not enough, and we do not teach how to use the remembrance. And the second idea is that we use quite often, the remembrance as a flag that has to express our identity or our ideology or the way that we are understanding something, and not really as a mirror, when we can ask ourselves, when we can, let's say, have some doubts about what we have to do. And it's very clear for me in the two questions that I receive certainly the more from journalists, from educators, from different parts of the public opinion in all my public discussions or interviews. The first question is what to do in order to have a more important number of young people coming to visit Auschwitz? This is the first question. The second question is, what will we do when the last survivors will disappear? This is the second question. Those two questions are the most often asked to me, and perhaps they represent, with several variations, 60 or 70 or perhaps even more percent of questions that I receive. And in the light of those questions, the responsibility about the future world is in the hand of the teenagers. They have to come to Auschwitz, or in the hand of those 95 or 100 years old people that are, yes, departing. Now it's quite natural. Nobody asks about all what is in the middle. People that are 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. Nobody asks me what to do in order that people that have 50 years old will come more often to visit Auschwitz. No, it does not appear. I think I'm not psychologist, I'm historian, but it's for me something very similar to a reaction that psychology calls a projection. We project our vision of the memory alive today on the teenagers or on the survivors in order to a little bit protect ourselves to have some too much difficult questions about our responsibility today. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And the sentence that we heard, place of memory is education. And I think it's a good moment to turn to Nadav, because education is something that you're dealing with. You seem to be the most pessimistic part of the panel when we talked about the crisis. We are in the educational center here at the Auschwitz Memorial. So now maybe let's try to listen. How can we use education in order to make this memory more important? We heard from Danielle about the truth-seeking is one of the things. And one thing that I'll certainly agree with you, because memory is not historical facts. But memory without historical facts erodes and distorts. And we live in the time, and I'm running the social media, I meet many people, and I can see how people have problem in getting to the very basic details. And how can we build something that will force people to act, that will kind of build the mirror in which they will see some reflection, but also the urge to act when everything is based on a very thin lines of lack of facts, of the problems that we have. And there are many dangers that we'll discuss in another question. But first, this very important question, maybe on a little bit more positive note. How education can actually help us to strengthen memory?
Thank you. So first of all, I'm not pessimistic. I think I'm realistic. But
I think every pessimist wants to declare this. And
on a more serious note, what we try to do at Sapienship is return to the fundamentals, to the human fundamentals, which is how we think is the path forward. So we live in a very fragmented world. We've discussed this, opposing opinions and populism and the growing impossibility of distinguishing between real and fake, etc. And the educational landscape is no different. And what we think, or what we're trying to do, is supply educators and students with the way to return to a common ground between all human beings. And that may sound grand, but that's something that we can all relate to because we're all human beings. It doesn't matter where we come from, what our ideologies, what country we come from, or what's our past. Because we're all part of the same species, right? We all breathe the same air. We're all part of the same evolutionary heritage. And so we all have different memories of our past. But if we dig deep, we all have the memory of being a species that encountered similar situations across our evolutionary heritage. So this, maybe I'll get to specificities that we can relate to. For example, when we supply educators with tools to teach history or math or the arts, we always go back to what this subject matter has to do with us being human beings. Math or science in general, many countries tend to teach sciences in a different way. Often it gets instrumentalized and ideologized. But we think that you can teach science from a basic human way. For instance, mathematics. How does the fact that we are human beings allowed us to think with numbers? And how does thinking with numbers or doing things with math shaped our evolutionary heritage, shaped us as human beings? How does the fact that we can tell stories shaped us as human beings? And what is it about us as humans that makes it possible for us to tell stories in the first place? These things can create a common ground and a possibility for a shared human story that transcends the divisions that ultimately lead to these divisions that can cause conflicts, for example. So this is something that we try to do at Sapienship in regards to education.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As you heard, many different perspectives when we talk about this challenge of our global responsibility. And maybe this is also the moment where the audience may have questions, because you heard different perspectives. So maybe here is the first time I will give the audience the possibility to ask the question to our panelists, if there are any questions. So I see the question over there, gentlemen.
Hi, this is a great panel. Thank you very much. And I think we're kind of finally getting to the meat of the matter here. I share Nadav's sense of realism. I think we're in a really sort of interesting moment in human history. There are a lot of there are bad faith actors out there who will use AI, use social media to peddle all sorts of different things. But there are huge swathes of the population now who don't really want to be engaged in remembering. There's huge swathes of the world that want to look away, want to forget. But the more interesting thing I just wanted to pick up on, it's related to this actually, was a comment made, you made the comment about Napoleon and Nero. And as you were talking about that, I was thinking, early 1900s, at that point in history, you're 80 years after the end of the Napoleonic Wars, right? Who in the 1900s were trying to cultivate memories about the Napoleonic Wars? The Napoleonic Wars were very consequential, obviously, in the 19th century. They laid down a framework, a settlement for how Europe conducted business for the rest of the 19th century. And, by and large, it was a much more peaceful affair than it was before, although Europe externalized its violence through the empire in Africa and other parts of the world. We're at a unique point here where institutions like this one, and there are many other similar institutions that are seeking to cultivate a memory of the Second World War and the Holocaust and the other crimes associated with it. We're 80 years out from an event, and we're actually sort of moving into kind of new ground in the sense that we're trying to cultivate a memory that goes beyond what a lot of human memories haven't really done before, if you see what I mean. Like we're going to be trying to repeat and learn, not repeat the mistakes, but to try and learn the lessons of a horrendous catastrophe in human history that is now approaching a century in our past. And in a sense, what we're trying to do is we're trying to cultivate a memory against what we all know deep down is an inevitability, which is that in time, these things can be lost in the same way that Napoleon and Nero, etc., are lost. I just wondered, I was really sort of drawn to those metaphors that you raised. I just wondered if you've given sort of thought to, it is an opportunity in a sense. I believe, I'm with Nadav. I think realistically this is a crisis, but it's a crisis in the sense that, you know, we have we have an ecosystem of institutions that are seeking to cultivate and perpetuate these memories for new generations, which didn't exist in the 1900s. And then, of course, you know, a decade or two later, Europe is at war again, right? But we're trying to cultivate these memories and trying to push that sort of collective memory, if you like, beyond where I think we've been before. But we have this added challenge of what Nadav correctly describes. This is very fractured knowledge economy. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm just sort of thinking aloud.
So I think with the Nero, you asked the question to Piotr Cywiński, so...
Yes, I share many of your doubts, of course, but I think, first of all, the problem today is, I think, not mainly institutional, and it's not mainly, as we can think many times, linked to the times that are running. Because the memory is something that is not placed 80 years ago, the memory is here and now. It takes from the facts from 80 years ago, but it's something that is living now, today, in each of us. And I think that the problems that we have now, that we feel now, and that we will feel certainly more and more in the next years, are due to a very, very quick and very, very deep changes in our society, certainly more deep than we are thinking now, than we can imagine. The fracturalization, yes, of fragmentation of our society that you are talking about. I think that it's something that is very clearly linked, supported, or even it's a very deep, certainly more deeper that we can imagine, results of the social media. For me, it's very clear. If you are, you know, the only one person, if your school, who is thinking that the Earth is really flat, you feel uncomfortable with that. Or if you are the only one in your small town or in your family that is still thinking that the Earth is flat. But one day, some I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, you started to find some other people all around the world that think like you, that the Earth is really flat. And from that moment, on Facebook, on Twitter, on all those different social media, you started to create a sort of society, a community of people who are thinking like you. You are in your room with people that you accepted inside who are thinking the same like you. You are in your, I don't know, your group of discussion. You are in your space in the internet, and it is, from that moment, it is no more a problem of your own, let's say, difficulty to have some social links around you in the small town, in your family or in your school. You found, at the end, your society. It started to be, for you, a moment of not only your own ideas, that Quanon or I don't know what, but it started to be your social reality. Your community is thinking like you feel stronger, you feel that it's really a part of your identity and nobody can attack your identity because the Earth is flat. And you know that, and everybody around you repeat that. And I think this is something completely new. People sometimes feel really, when we speak with even not teenagers, but young people in general, today they feel to belonging to some social space organized through internet, sometimes more than for the real local reality in their schools or in their, I don't know, towns. And I think it's perhaps one of the reasons that we have very few deniers on our websites, on our social media. It appears from time to time, but it's certainly not, or neo-Nazis, or I don't know, ideologies like this, because they found their own society somewhere else. And this is something new, that you can have your society, your social life, in a very different, let's say, areas, with people from all around the world. And for that, the institutions are perhaps not enough. We need some new strategies. We have some new approaches. I do not have some golden proposal here, but I think we are living more and more in a completely new society, or societies.
And let's just add to this. Now I will go to this more positive note when we think what kind of community we've built in our social media, and that's part of my work when we have close to 3 million people who want to be engaged. When I remember when we have a podcast, and you can all listen to On Auschwitz podcast, and right now actually we published 2 episodes on the history of education here at the Auschwitz Memorial and the future of education at the Auschwitz Memorial. So please feel free to explore these. But we had a problem of having a women voice in English, because we do it in English, and we started searching for some guides here, some people who we knew, and we didn't find a person. And then let's put it online and let's ask our social media. And we thought maybe we'll get 3 people, 5 people. And we had so many people who wanted to get engaged. So many people, I have a studio, I lived in this place, in that place. And we had Agnieszka, who is the head of the e-learning and happens also to be my wife. I should say it on the record. We have to prepare an answer that we do not need more, because we were so overwhelmed with people's activity.
But there are still people from the same community.
Yes,
you are asking for a denier to discuss with him. I suppose that no one will answer, because they are living in another community.
Yes, so that's many challenges, many layers here, but we also have to try to, on one hand, use it, on the other hand, find ways to maybe go out of these bubbles that we have. But there was also one question here, the gentleman raised his hand, so if we may get the microphone here, it's coming.
Thank you. A very short question. I don't want to speak in terms of metaphysical or genetic memory, but why do we keep more easily the memory of the fear of otherness than the memory of war, of atrocities, of massacres? It seems to me that we are keen more of remembering how to stand against each other than how to stand united around the same fear of all what we experienced in the past century. Can you respond to that?
Anyone from the panel wishes to address? Johanna?
Maybe I can say something. Well, I think you really touch upon a really, really important part of how to understand how memory politics can actually have a positive influence on peace. And we can see in those communities and societies where you actually make space for the stories of actually supporting each other, of actually helping each other, of actually recounting stories about the other that does not fit the sort of stereotypes. That's one of the signs where you can have a memory politics that's conducive to peace. And I think the stories are there. So it's really the politics of silencing them or making them public and making these voices heard. And I think that's like a really important task, I think, for educators, for researchers, for ordinary people who live their lives in conflict-affected societies. So I think that's a really, really important point to take with us.
Thank you. That was very thoughtful, and thank you for the question. I have another thought about this, because it's true that the memories of atrocities and war and otherness is something that occupies our minds, because it's very it's divisive, and things that are divisive have a tendency to attract our minds. This is why, by the way, this is why social media works so well. But I want to offer to offer a different approach to this thinking. I think that stories of cooperation, and so stories of peace, is something much stronger than stories of war and atrocities. We cooperate all the time. Our entire history is the history of cooperation. We humans are distinct in how we know to cooperate in large numbers. And this is why we have complex societies. And this is why we can, by the way, this is why we can do awful things like happened in Auschwitz. But this is why we can also build and reconciliate and have this conference that deals with the atrocities of the past in a constructive way. So we tend to ignore these stories of cooperation and peace because it's like fish swimming in water, right? What's water? But cooperation and peace is all around us all the time. So maybe a change of reflection is also necessary here.
Can I just to just come back to what I started to talk about, our research project. And in all the 5 conflict-affected societies that we have been doing research in, which is Bosnia and Herzegovina, Rwanda, South Africa, Cyprus, and Cambodia, we see these stories. And we see that people often are willing to take quite big risks to tell these stories. And they might tell these quite divisive narratives that are like on the collective level, that might be sort of hegemonic, but then they will find spaces to tell these other stories. And they might do it a little bit in silence, but it will be like, well, you know, that group are the bad perpetrators, and it's good that they have been expelled from here. But my neighbor, she phoned me in the middle of the night and told me to get up and leave, and she saved me. And these stories are repeated over and over again, and people hold on to them. And I think it is because they are so, they are powerful, and they are also empowering, I think.
I have the impression that we have to add to those very valuable reflections that we are living in some very populistic times. And when you have so many very quick changes, and ununderstandable changes, let's say, in the evolution of the society, you have this fragmentation, you have those goals that are changing from even decades to decade. I have the impression that we have some problems with the understanding and definition of our identity, and people have problems with their identities. They are searching for some artificial identities to find some, to find who they are. And in this situation, many times, the memory or the past or the facts are used to build an identity against somebody. Or an identity that you must be proud of it. In a normal situation, you know, if you have a strong identity, you know who you are, you know, you don't need to be proud. It's not the first goal, let's say, to reinforce yourself in your, No, you can even discuss what was wrong, what was bad in your past. It will not challenge your identity. Let's say. But if you try to rebuild or to take another identity, if you think that you are in some transition, let's say, in this worldwide area, yes, you need to find something that you can be proud, you can be strong, and many times it's something that you are building on your doubts or even on your fear. That means there is some danger, the danger is the others. And at that moment, when arrives a language of populism, it will certainly reinforce, let's say, your feeling of perhaps there is some reasons or some goals or some directions that I can really choose in that way in a very quick time, let's say. So I think that the populism is certainly not the only one responsible of those situations, but we have a very difficult combination of of a problem with our identities and the voice of the populism in the public narrative.
I saw Daniel picking up the microphone.
Just one quick point. What an incredibly difficult and complicated time we are in. But I wanted to say, when in the session, in the morning session, when Nadav posed the question about what he said is the elephant in the room, you know, some people have responded by saying they are limited by their mandate. They have to focus on what their mandate allows them to do. And some have responded by saying the best probably they can do is to show the complexity of the issue or the matter. But I mean, honestly, but I thought what Nadav asked is an invitation to revisit even our mandates. Our mandates are not, you know, with all the different institutions you belong to, particularly related to this topic, the mandates are not written on a stone. They can and they should be revisited depending on the time and the context we are in. So I thought that was like an important invitation, like despite our mandates, you know, let's remember the big picture, because we are essentially talking about atrocity crimes and how to take a lesson from past memories to prevent more atrocity crimes. So, you know, it's almost a duty for us, if we are in this line of work, it's a duty for us to say something about it or to do something about it. So I think it would be very difficult to say we would be limited by our mandate, because it almost defeats the purpose of the very mandate itself. And second, on the point about the complexity, I mean, you know, almost every conflict is complex. You know, there is no question about complexity of in almost all conflicts across the globe. But the complexity cannot be, again, an excuse to shy away from what we need to be doing. So I thought really Nadav's point was a courageous invitation for us to do a deep soul searching, to think about what the current context we are in really means in terms of how we respond to what unfolds in front of our eyes on a daily basis.
Okay, so we'll go back to questions. Now I'll try to ask mine with a little bit longer introduction. I remember you are in line. One thing, there are few things I wanted to raise. One thing with the social media, and I'm not the author of this idea. In a conversation with Marek Zając, who is the secretary of the International Auschwitz Council, we were discussing the challenges of social media and the polarization that it's. So there's an initial flaws. Someone programmed this to gain attention, not to create us smarter, wiser, and so on. It's not a tool for education, unfortunately. So that's one thing. But indeed, the negative seems to be drawing more attention, and sometimes it overshadows the positive things that are happening. And if your questions about the role of memories, why should young people come here? What is the role of the world without survivors? For me, this very question I'm very often asked as a person working at the press office of the memorial is, tell us about the bad things visitors are doing. I mean, what are the problems that you're facing, how they misbehave, the issue of selfies, and many other things. And I usually say, I can talk about this because there are 2 million people visiting the memorial every year, and you'll find some people who are disrespectful. But on the other hand, we have to remember that we'll have incidents, and then most of the visitors will come here, will be moved. Maybe it will really be something that will affect your life. As you mentioned, 3 visits, different periods in your lives, a different approach to what you've seen, different question that you ask yourselves. And usually no one is really interested in what these people are thinking when they leave after a tour. The world of today is interested, what were the problems? And this is something that we should also look and sometimes try to give some more positive positive things and talk about this silent majority that will be going through, not this loud minority that will try to take over the floor. That's another thing. And now I'll try to go to the question that is hanging in the air, because we observe major changes, how memory can be shaped. On the other hand, with the technological changes that we are observing day to day, we can reach people quicker, we can reach people easier and further with just one click of a button. And today the technology allows us. On the other hand, polarization, distortion of memory is another button that we can press. And yesterday I spent over an hour talking to a major press agency, because in the last 2 months on Facebook, we saw something that was new and something quite disturbing, that we could see a number of accounts created, pages created, that copy the way the Auschwitz Memorial talks about victims of Auschwitz, remind people every day on their birthday with a short biogram, with the photograph taken from different archives. And there are pages who, probably only for clickability, they either copy our text and AI generate the photograph of the person, so indeed they create a fake photograph of a real person. But we notice that it takes a step further, that there are pages who create the story and create the photographs, which means they try to pretend that they're commemorating people who never existed. And they create names and very poetic AI-generated stories. And on the other, and this is a problem, and Meta doesn't really seem to look at it as an issue. It doesn't break the regulations of the platform. On the other hand, we can see how people who go through these feeds and they do not really pay attention to what they see, they will share it, they will like it, they'll like their comments, not that they're being manipulated. So that's another thing. And just a few weeks ago, I had this pleasure to be a guide of a group of American cadets, people who are to become officers. And I try to find a metaphor that will touch them, some story, some kind of an approach that will be important to them. And I use the metaphor of a compass. I mean, a soldier should have a compass. I don't know how it looks today, but as, you know, if you think of the military equipment, you have your weapons, but you also have your compass. And however, in this case, when we're talking about the visit, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't want to, yes. But in this case, when we were talking about the meaning of a visit, I told them that the visit for them can be a different compass. It can be a moral compass. When they come here, when they see this history, when they go through these very complicated facts, and we hope to put these facts as a mirror in order to maybe shape some memory that they'll take with them to their units, to their academies. We were talking about this kind of moral obligation. And we do believe here at the Auschwitz Memorial that a visit and looking at this story through this mirror, as director said, can be something to set our moral compasses. But, as we've already mentioned, the compass, a real compass, can be distorted and damaged and shattered, and the moral compass can be damaged and distorted. And the question that I'm trying to get to, and hoping that maybe you can try to give us an answer, who can protect this memory? Is it the institution? Is it the people? Is it the groups? Is it those 4 points and creating, you know, this accountability and building memory in these different networks? Who or what should be the guardians in this new global world that, as we were saying, causes problems for our understanding? And I'm leaving it as an open question, whoever wants to start. Yes,
yeah,
Nadav.
That's a complex question. What I'm thinking in this regard, especially in regard to the part of your question that related to how information is distorted today by technological means, I think and I believe that this is something that will only grow and grow in the coming years, is that we must foster a greater digital literacy among people, young people especially, but obviously I don't want to project everything on teenagers. As you said, we all must have a better digital literacy. And when I say digital literacy, I mean the ability to distinguish between real and fake, and knowing that not everything that we read or watch or listen to it comes from credible sources. And this is something especially important when we discuss memory, because memory, as you mentioned, is being distorted and manipulated in many ways, but often in technological ways, with AI and even in more primitive ways. And this is something that I can give an example of from where I come from. In the Israeli-Palestinian context, Israelis and pro-Israelis and Palestinians and pro-Palestinians both use and misuse information online to excuse their ideologies, which are often based on misinformation. This is because the internet is full of information that is wrong, manipulated, distorted, or simply fake about the history and about the memory of each group. And so Palestinians and pro-Palestinians will often say that Jews were never in Israel. Israel was never a land of the Jewish people, because here there's sources online that say this. Or on the opposite end, Israelis and pro-Israelis often say that there's no such thing as Palestinians. They have no connection to this land, because here this source and this source online says this. And so the digital literacy is something that we must put an emphasis on when we talk about education in relation to memory itself.
Yes, well, I think that your example and what you struggle with here really shows that all sites today, I would say, also have a digital dimension. And so it's not really a question of that sites of memory, different types of sites, some authentic sites, other sites, there is always a digital dimension to them. And that means that we, as visitors to these sites and people engaging with these sites, move from the material, physical sites and also into the digital site. And I think this is just a very good illustration of how memoryscapes are formed today in a global world. And I also think that we tend to think about these sites as places for these memory walls, as you rightly point to. But they have also opened up for other types of agencies for people in conflict-affected societies. I mean, one thing is, for example, turning to Ukraine. We can see how even while the war, Russia's war against Ukraine is ongoing, there are digital commemoration spaces opening up where people who have been displaced, people in the diaspora now, can mourn loss. There are also other digital spaces where you can actually have a political struggle to have your memories recognized. I'm just now thinking about Syria and the memory wall, I think, where they have taken photographs of graffiti during the Syrian revolution and have saved them like in a sort of digital archive. And these pro-democracy, pro-freedom graffiti does not exist anymore in the material world, but now they actually exist as a sort of wall in the digital space. So then this activism can continue in that digital space, just to also show that lots of people can use the digital space for a variety of reasons, all connected to memory politics.
Yes, I fully agree. We didn't wait until the AI to have fakes. It appears a long time ago. I remember this guy who has some troubles because a visitor is attacking him in order to oblige the guy to show the exact place when the boy in pyjama was meeting the other boy through the barbed wires. Saying that he saw the film, so please show me this very place. Yeah, it was a fake, at least. But I think that if you ask about the remembrance, about the memory, you know, when I take a decision today now, and in my head I have some reminiscences from the past, that means that this is a memory. We cannot transmit a memory. I can't give my memory to somebody else. It doesn't function like this. I can help him to develop his own memory. I must help it. This is my role, if I am an educator, to help his memory to be more and more effective. And in that situation, I think that we, as a memorial, we must preserve very strictly the historical facts, the true, and we have to be a place where the visitors will find and understand their memory. This is, I think, a distinction about the historical facts and the memory. At the end, everybody will have his own memory, but we can help. I remember just an anecdote for this at the end to illustrate perhaps a brutal anecdote. I was guiding 2 or 3 years ago a very important first-rank European politician in Auschwitz-Birkenau, and we were approaching the ruins of the gas chambers. And he looked at that ruins, and he asked me a question that appears many times in this very place. Mr. Director, I have just one question. Why did the Allies didn't bomb those gas chambers and those crematoria? And I told you, you know, there are many different answers to this question. But at the end, it's very simple. It's for the same reason that no one important European politicians took the floor to defend the Rohingya when they were massacred. After, he continued the end of the visit with a complete silence. He didn't ask me anything more. Even I was thinking if it was not too brutal from my side but I think, yes, this is this way to help to build a relation between what you remember and your today choices.
Thank you. I wanted to reflect on the second part of your question where you asked who are the guardians. It does seem to me that in any place where there is a democratic government worth its name, I think primarily it's a duty of a state to be a guardian. It is because this is a public matter, this is a societal interest, so primarily a state has a responsibility. But we don't leave it to a state alone, and which is why you have a community of people, interested professionals, interested citizens who care about the issues, are the second level of the guardians. You know, like people, the kind of people in this room, you know, who care about these issues and who gather around these issues and who study these issues and who work in such institutions and so on, you know. So that's how we actually see a continuity of this work with the kind of volunteers and interns you bring here for the work and so on, you know. So I think we need both a responsibility of a state as a state institution to do what they're supposed to do, and then we just need to continue to build a community of people, either in a form of civil society or independent institutions or academia or concerned interested citizens, to continue to be the guardians of these memories.
Thank you very much. So let's go back to the question, and I can see another question over there. And 3 more, but we have 11 minutes, so we have to be on time. But let's, over there, the gentleman.
So let's see if I can recall what was going on a half an hour ago when I wrote this down. But yeah, I think it's a general idea that we've been talking about the whole panel. I was really struck by Peter's idea of social media being kind of a revolution and causing an avalanche of populism. In the Anglophone context, I have been likening for my students the advent of social media as almost a return to pre-Enlightenment norms in some ways. Times of witch hunts and mob justice and religious wars because everybody can just whip everybody up into a frenzy so quickly. And it almost seems like it's led to a collapse of the editorial function. 40 years ago, we could rely on the news media and editors of newspapers to kind of be custodians of the truth for us. And there wouldn't be as much populism as a result. And it's almost unleashed a sort of collective id of society. And so it's causing challenges for us in this way. I think elites have also become very anxious about this because we've lost control that we had 30 years ago. And so the danger is that elites are trying to quickly put a cap back on this, but I hear Nadav speaking about populism, and I think it's really easy for us as elites to say, that's what the working class thinks, they're populist, they're bad, let's try to sweep them under the rug. And we know what's real and what they believe is fake. And it's still easy even for us to, as elites, to try to reassert control with paradigms that are still being influenced by social media. So I think that to end with a note of positive optimism, though, I think in a democracy which is functioning, we have to realize that over time, most people come to a fairly reasonable point of view. We have to allow for these different fragments of society, maybe in a couple generations, they'll start to realize, just like the religious fanatics of the 17th century, realize that maybe it's not worth fighting each other all the time. And therefore, maybe one of the roles of a museum like this is to present information, but to have a sort of positive faith that if we just allow even populists that we don't like right now to be exposed to the truth via institutions like this, eventually, if our democracy functions, we'll come to, you know, something more like civil society once again than we have with the initial unleashing of social media on the world. An observation, I'm not sure if you agree or not.
If someone wants to address, we have very shortly.
Very shortly. Yes, it would be a very optimistic proposal, but your starting idea is that our democracy are functioning well. It's a risky tese.
There was a question, lady over there. The microphone is coming.
Right. All my life I've been teaching about the Holocaust, and the reason is because I don't want it to happen. I know the Holocaust would not have happened without anti-Semitism, and it happened to the Jews, but me as an outsider, I'm interested in it so that it doesn't get repeated. But all my life, this keeps on happening. So there's something that is stopping it from happening. And people say maybe it's education. I don't think it's education. With Daniel Bekele is correct. I think what you need is judicial justice to stop it happening. You cannot, like Johanna said, let the local people in Bosnia decide whether those women were raped or not. You need an independent body to stop that happening. But we started this conference with bias. And the more I think about it, the more I think it keeps happening because Homo sapiens have this terrible tendency towards bias. And digital, fake, and so on, in my opinion, is bias gone berserk. That now it's not only just picking the facts, but creating them to suit your allegiance and your ideas. I've been in conferences, for example, discussing genocide when it comes to the Armenia-Turkish genocide. And what you can see happening is people literally saying, you know, if Turkey says this never happened, Armenia says it happened. So what happens is the people start to say, but are we in favor of Turkey or are we in favor of Armenia? And then this gets blown up on an international level. And now if you Google it, you actually have a list of countries, A, B, C, D, who are friends with Turkey. And the countries Z, X, Y, Z, who are not friendly with Turkey, who recognize the genocide, and those who do not like the Turks, or the other way around. I'm sorry, I got that mixed up. So I think the one way of because education, you can only start education if you have not global responsibility, but global approval. If you're in Turkey, you can't teach about the Armenian genocide because you don't have approval of that. It's not even recognized. You can't even say it's a genocide. So you need, I don't know how that will ever be achieved by Homo sapiens, but you need objective consistency. That when the lady in this morning's panel said you can actually see the pattern when it is happening. But how can we, as Homo sapiens, overcome our biases to be able to say, look, we need an independent body that can declare that a genocide is happening and stopping it? I mean, how do we get away from the Armenia situation where you have people saying yes, people saying no, and before I say yes or no, never mind the facts, digital or otherwise, depends on my allegiances. I don't know. I mean, it's just me crazy thinking, how can I stop this? I'm fed up of watching it being repeated, you know? And education can happen, but at least you need what Daniel was saying, you need the strict, those women, you're not going to get the locals giving you justice. You need an independent body. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have time for one more voice from the audience. Is there, over there, gentlemen? The microphone is coming.
Thank you so much. About the danger of the fake news and so on. I just wanted to remind you that some time ago, there were this meeting between the three Jewish men who were, thankfully we know the notes about this meeting, and they were trying to conquer the word. Of course, I'm joking. I'm talking about the protocols of Zion's, the wise men of Zion. And this is the father of all the fake news. It's the first big thing that was produced with the purpose of being a fake news. And it was created from a position of anti-Semitism to promote anti-Semitism, and it is being used until today. So what I'm trying to say is that this is nothing new. The technology is different, the society is different, the methodology is different, but the fact that there are the fake news or fake documents are being produced to produce hate, in specifically anti-Semitic hate, but not only, is really not new. And we have been fighting with it, and we have been finding ways to answer to this, and we will find ways to answer to the new technologies. It's really just a new technology. It's as a phenomena, it is not new. I agree with the Nadav. It's the digital and media literacy that we need. We need to be ready that it is more popularized and more easily spread. But again, as a phenomena, this is really nothing new. And I'm trying to say this as something optimistic and positive because we already survived all these years with all these fake things. Thank you so much.
Very quickly.
Very quickly. So first of all, the first, as far as I know, the first major fake news, misinformation that was mass-produced was in the beginning of the print era with the witch hunts. So the first mass-produced books were about the conspiracy of women against Christianity. That far precedes the protocols of Zion. But what I really want to say is that the fact that something is not new does not make it not less dangerous. Because right now what we have with AI is that it can mass produce and very easily fake pictures and movies and what have you. And I believe we can find ways to deal with it, but we shouldn't be say that it's we already know it happened before, so it's nothing to worry about. No, we need to address this with all seriousness because it's different.
Johanna?
Yes, I think taking the women in Bosnia and Herzegovina as an example, I think they need justice, truth and accountability from international institutions. They also need it from the local community because that's where they live and they are still suffering the consequences of crimes committed 3 decades ago. So I would say that's a lesson for durable peace, to have recognition from both the global and from the local.
Piotr?
If a person will have some interest to lie, perhaps he will serve you some lie. I don't think that I have just one life. I don't know how long it will be. I will not enter in a deep discussion with some deniers, some liars. I think I will achieve more to speaking to people of goodwill who don't know, who doubt, who want to learn something. You know, I think this is certainly more productive as a lesson. However, in a few weeks, we will present a new tool on our website to help those who want to close, let's say, the mouth to some deniers of the Holocaust. And no, the protocols were not the first lying bias. When Cain murdered Abel, God asked him, "Where is your brother?" And he answered, "I don't know. I am a God of my brother." According to the Torah, this is the first bias, yes, let's say, in the history of the humanity. It's longer than the protocols from Russia.
So, ladies and gentlemen, with this very deep journey into the past, when we try to discuss the global responsibility and reimagining memory communities and others for the future, I can only thank you for listening, for all your words, for all your questions, but we have 3 days of discussions to summarize. Thank you very much. Professor Dr. Johanna Mannergren, Dr. Daniel Bekele, Nadav Neuman, Dr. Piotr Cywiński, and myself, Paweł Sawicki. Please follow the Auschwitz Memorial wherever you can and help us in the digital world. So we are leaving, and we're leaving the stage for the summary of the conference.
Excuse me. So in the last 3 days, we took part in very interesting, very vivid, and I think also very, very valuable discussion. I think that what happened here during the last 3 days requires a kind of conclusion. Natalia, together with Marine, you have been working on the conference for the last, I don't know, 10 months. That was, you gave the ideas of the topics which were discussed during our conference. So may I ask you, Natalia, to try to sum up somehow our conference, to share with us the final reflection? Thank you.
Thank you, Ala. It actually has been more than 1.5 years of preparation, and I hope you could feel it. I mean, you could feel that it has been prepared in such a way that it functioned, and yeah, what I wanted to start with is that actually at the beginning we asked ourselves this question that we put into the title, is memory enough in the 21st century? The question that we haven't answered actually during these 3 days. And as also Elie Wiesel's words have been mentioned at the beginning, every question possesses a power that is lost in the answer. So actually, more powerful was the fact that we had this common search for the answer. the common search that manifested itself in lively discussions, and in discussions in which we actually did not always agree over things, but as Professor Dr. Bernd Simon put it in the keynote lecture, we professed respect towards ideas that differed from our opinions, from what we thought, but through that actually served as a starting point for reflection and for common search for these answers through bridging the gaps and cooperation. And as has been mentioned in the panel before, the stories of cooperation are more numerous, and hopefully they will remain like that, the stories of our cooperation that also hopefully stem from this networking during the conference, through recognizing each other as equals, and one step further, through seeing and hearing each other. We have talked a lot about collective memory. We have seen how much research has been done to promote this memory, but also to nuance it, to see more, and to have more in this memory that we are professing. Also, how much knowledge there is about how memory functions, what strong sides, but also what weak sides it has, what limitations can we notice and can we tackle in our everyday work as well. We could see how much work and effort is being put into making, for example, minorities' voices heard, or in keeping this memory alive in different parts of the world, in bringing people together and also reinforcing the values that we stand for: diversity, tolerance, respect, democracy, peace, and many more, of course. The values that almost 200 people participating in this conference share, and also I hope many, many more people that we also encounter in our work and life every day. The word crisis has appeared many times, and also we could see how many facets this word has. And these facets have been articulated in today's panel discussions and also the days before. Of course, it's very unsettling and sad, and we anticipate many more challenges, which also has been mentioned here right before me. I think this brings us to feel responsibility about what we see every day and what we anticipate. But I think also we should still bring a glimpse of hope back. Maybe this phrase that Dr. Cywiński started with, that if memory is in crisis, or if we think about memory being in crisis, that maybe it means that memory still counts and it is still relevant. It is something that is an important point of reference for us all here. And I would suggest that we try to see a glimpse of hope in that until we are talking about it, it is relevant and it can help us find a way on. So the question hasn't been answered, and it probably will not be. But I think we will probably take this question and many other questions with us from this conference. But I think, and I would like, and I think not only me, but also us, we would like you to take two more things from this conference. One more thing is the reflection that, and the feeling that you are not alone, and we are not alone in this very difficult situation of tackling, of encountering the challenges, the crisis that we have tried to define here in the panel discussions. And this is a feeling, I think this is something that we also need this conference for, to see that we are not alone in doing what we are doing and in facing what we are facing. And one more thing, of course, is that, we look forward to welcoming you once again in 2 years, because this conference is organized every 2 years. So one more thing to take with you, remember that we are looking forward to welcome you here in 2 years at a conference that probably will have a different title, but hopefully will have the same format of bringing people together to create a platform for discussion. And maybe, hopefully, we will see you also in the meantime, before the 2 years have passed, because we are here, and please come back. Thank you very much for being part of this community of the conference, being here. Thank you. I give the word to Director Andrzej Kaczorzyk.
Natalia, stay here. Mogę po polsku, czy nie? Tak?
Can I speak
Do you have a
English?
headset or not?
Please put on your headsets.
Not. Thank you so much. Once more, I had this privilege to welcome you and now to close the conference. And I am so happy that we had you here among us, and we were also open to hear each other. It was very important for both for many sides. It is the world were here with us. First of all, my sincere thanks for our heroes, Natalia and Marine. It was something very unique, how this approach, how everything was prepared here. But not only, but the most important part of our conference were you, participants of this, for us, very important event. And I thanks to all panelists, to all speakers, all participants. Come back. In 2 years, we will organize the next, for next time, next conference. Then, thank you for your active participation. I hear many positive voices. I know that maybe I was not able to hear negative voices, but I hope it was also something very positive for you. Then I think it was also a good time to build a network. And I started with words that we should be responsible for ourselves only, but I now see, as Natalia told us, that we are together, that we should be together. Then, thank you for coordinators once more, but especially I would like to thank all volunteers. Over 30 people. Without volunteers, our volunteers are this all technical equipment and support. We are together. Our mobiles, as our mobiles, also we have our volunteers from the local schools and not only. Thank you. And especially thanks for moderators, speakers, and interpreters. And furthermore, I would like to thank you, my closest colleagues from our International Center of Education about Auschwitz and the Holocaust, Adelina and her team, and Barbara and her technical team. Thank you so much. And all my colleagues from Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial. Thank you. We will wait for you in 2 years at the conference, but of course we will cooperate soon in the nearest future. Thank you.